All right, let's get you the latest that is happening. In the breaking news that's coming in, Israeli military says it has intercepted another drone launched from Iran. In a post on social media, the IDF said following alerts regarding the intrusion of a hostile aircraft in the Dead Sea area. Its Air Force intercepted an unmanned aerial vehicle launched from Iran. This is the latest that we're getting at this hour. This is the breaking news that is coming in from the volatile West Asian region. Israeli military says that it has intercepted another drone launched from Iran. This was in a post on social media where the IDF said, following alerts regarding the intrusion of hostile aircraft in the Dead Sea area, its Air Force intercepted an unmanned aerial vehicle which was launched from Iran. This is the latest we're getting at this hour. To discuss what's happening in West Asia between Israel and Iran, joining us on the broadcast from Washington, D.C. is Yusuf Kalyan, Policy Advisor, Polaris National Security Institute. Thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One.
Thank you so much for having me.
To begin with, I want to begin by asking you what your assessment of all that's happened in West Asia is between Israel and Iran in the past few days.
Well, I think it's fundamentally shifted how the region is going to be for the next several decades. I think Israel has clearly established itself as the lead hegemonic power in the Middle East, obviously with the support of the US and other allies. And I think they're sending a strong signal to anybody that opposes, a vision for the region that doesn't seek to include them, that seeks to keep them down or weak, that they're not going to stand for that. And that's fundamentally going to change how the region operates. I don't think they're going to be facing as many threats as they would have before. And this is also because of the lead up to the war, where Israel was able to essentially weaken Hezbollah and other Iranian allies throughout the region.
Right. Now, speaking of fundamental shifts, I want to begin by asking you what your assessment of Operation Rising Lion is. Of course, we know that these were preemptive strikes, and that, of course, led to the exchanges that we have been seeing. This is the 8th day now. The goal clearly was to eliminate a perceived nuclear threat, something that Benjamin Netanyahu has repeated time and again, going as far back as 1996. We've been hearing statements from the Israeli Prime Minister that there is a perceived nuclear threat when it comes to Iran. That being said, do you think this is a breakdown of the preemptive strikes model in West Asia?
Well, the thing is that I think it was quite clear from the beginning that Iran was never going to be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. And so far, their Operation Rising Lion in Iran has been quite successful. They've eliminated and weakened a lot of their abilities to launch ballistic missiles, threaten America and our allies in the region, including in the Gulf. I think, like I mentioned before, that the weakening of Iranian proxies throughout the region in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, as we saw with the fall of the Assad regime, has really shown Iran that their efforts, their strategies were not working. And Israel has been very successful in targeting this spread of ballistic missiles, or Iranian attempts at spreading ballistic missiles through its allies and proxies in the region. It has fundamentally weakened them. And I think it's shown the world that the risk of advancing towards nuclear weapons or trying to create deterrence by bolstering up, military assets, by bolstering up missiles, is going to prompt a response and a strike. I think many countries view this as a way of creating deterrence, but this has actually shown the opposite, that this is what led to the war and this is what led to the conflict.
Right. We will come back to the strategic objectives here and whether or not Israel has been able to achieve them. I want to also begin by asking you, I'm sure you know, of course, the United States and Iran were engaged in dialogue before this happened as well. Even though there was an impasse, there was ongoing dialogue. Right now, we are seeing and we are hearing from the White House as well that there is still a window of opportunity for there to be dialogue and to have a negotiated solution. That being said, as you mentioned earlier as well, that perhaps there was an understanding that Iran was not going to agree to the nuclear negotiations and the demands that were being put forth by Donald Trump. That being said, do you think there is hope now? If there wasn't before, now that things have escalated and by such measure, do you think there is any hope of a negotiated solution now? And do you think Iran would even want to come back to the negotiations table?
I think, yes, I think Israel's actions and the US support has actually shown Iran the other side, the other option. For years there have been threats to take out Iran's nuclear program and weaken its ballistic missiles systems and programs. But there was no concrete action that scared it enough and pushed it away from proceeding that route and really just using negotiations as a decoy or delay tactic as it advanced its nuclear and ballistic missile programs. And I think what this has shown is actually they're much more willing to come to the table now because they realize the severity of the threat to their regime. As President Donald Trump said yesterday, he issued them the ultimate ultimatum: give up your nuclear weapons, and come to the table and be welcome to the regional economic and security cooperation of the region that can help Iran, or they have the option two, which is regime weakening, Iran potentially becoming a failed state. Part of the problem is that Iran has not had the incentive to engage in real serious negotiations before. Now, with the threat of force, they are back on the table. They understand that they don't have any of the cards anymore, as has been said numerous times, and they're much more willing to actually come to the table and talk. We've seen tomorrow that the Iranian foreign minister is going to be meeting with some European allies. And also, there was rumors of a meeting in Oman, which shows that the Iranians are already seeking to engage in negotiations and trying coming back to the negotiating table. So the tactic is already working.
Right, and just to expand on that, if we were to talk about Israel's strategic objectives, do you think it has been able to achieve them? Because some might argue that Iran's nuclear program cannot simply be bombed out of existence. And now that Iran has seen the other option, as you mentioned, do you think that's a possibility? And do you think Israel has been able to deter Iran?
I think Israel definitely has been able to deter Iran because not only have they targeted and weakened many of their nuclear sites, but they've actually killed the people who had the knowledge about it. They've targeted people who were aware of the nuclear program, who were working to develop those weapons. Not only have they taken out the actual infrastructure and their ability to do that, but they've taken out many of the people who had that knowledge with them, and that's not something that's easy to bring back.
Right, and if we were to go back to the negotiations that were happening before Operation Rising Lion was launched, Iran did say that the nuclear program was a red line for Iran. That being said, that was of course followed by what we're seeing right now. Do you think this is a complete breakdown of the red line's defense model?
No, I think this is just us seeing the truth of the Iranian way of diplomacy, which is always to try and save face. They often say one thing and do another, as a way of attempting to save face domestically and around the world. So I don't really believe in their red lines from the beginning, and they're definitely what this has shown is that they can't actually enforce them. They've made several, very scary and detailed worded language issuing threats, but there's no teeth to it. They haven't really been able to inflict much damage. The amount of ballistic missiles that they've launched at Israel has actually drastically increased over the past couple of days as their capability to do so has gone down. It's a lot of tough talk, not a lot of tough action.
Right, and of course, we've also heard from Donald Trump that he will perhaps decide on American involvement in the war in the next 2 weeks, which is perhaps also the window of opportunity for conversation that we're talking about here. That being said, it may reflect some sort of a reluctance on the part of the United States to get involved in this war. And to that, I want to ask, do you think Israel can sustain this fight on its own, considering that it is also engaged in a war on other fronts? Gaza.
I definitely think Israel has the capability to do this, yes, but I did want to go back and say that President Trump has actually been quite clear since he got involved in politics, and the White House actually released a fact sheet kind of laying this out about how President Trump has been very clear for over a decade now that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and this has been stated multiple times in the media and interviews, etc. So he has issued that red line to Iran. They have continued to ignore it. So I do think that there's a possibility that if they really don't come to the negotiating table and give up their weapons peacefully, that the U.S. can get involved. Frankly speaking, from looking at this from an America First point of view, weakening Iran and making sure that they don't have a nuclear weapon is an America first strategy. Israel's war is an America first strategy. They're the ones that are leading this, not the United States. Some support, maybe, bringing in American B-2 bombers to knock out Fordo or Natanz or other nuclear sites, is in America's interest and would not necessarily be a heavy lift. So I do think that the U.S. would prefer that Iran comes to the negotiating table, but President Trump has made clear that if we need to get involved more directly, we will.
All right, so just to be clear, you're saying that this is also an America First policy with regards to Israel. So again, I just wanted to ask, we've heard that Netanyahu has said that Israel will keep doing this for as long as it's required. To what end is really the question here?
I think the end is, as Prime Minister Netanyahu said, I believe earlier today or yesterday, the goal is not regime change, actually. The goal is to just ensure that Iran does not have nuclear capabilities. And Israel will stop at nothing to ensure that. And frankly speaking, their timeline is much more flexible. They've now established complete superiority over Iran's airspace. They can do what they want whenever they want it. They're not in a rush to leave. They're not in a rush to wrap this up, and they probably won't until they're capable of fully destroying Iran's nuclear system. And like I said earlier, the knowledge with it, the scientists, the people who are aware, the documents. They'll keep going at this until they feel like they're safe because they know the risk is that if they pull out prematurely, if the cake is out of the oven before it's fully baked, that this can come back and be a problem for them in the future if Iran does seek a nuclear weapon.
Right. Thank you for mentioning the position there of Netanyahu, who said that regime change is not the goal. But there is some sort of a shift with regards to that as well, because he did say earlier that this is for the people of Iran as well, and this is an opportunity for them, saying that about 80% of them would want to throw out, and these are his words, I'm quoting here, that he said this on Sunday, I believe that was the 15th or the 16th. He said this, that 80% of Iranian people would want to throw these theocratic thugs out. Now we see that he's saying that regime change is not the goal for Israel, and that could be the result. Again, that being said, what happens to the people of Iran and whether or not this can completely dismantle the nuclear program? Do you think that is a goal that can be achieved?
I do think it is a goal that can be achieved. I think the regime is learning that when serious force is brought to the table, they can't withstand that pressure, and that may force them, just out of their own selfish desire to survive, to give up their nuclear program as a way of maintaining the regime's power. I also do think that at this moment, right now, Iranians are, hunkering down and worried about bombs and about being targeted. So regime change isn't necessarily on the top of their minds, but like the Prime Minister of Israel said, and many other instances that have been done of polling of Iranian people, the regime is extremely unpopular. And once this is all done and the people are able to focus not just on the day-to-day, but think more long-term, they might face some longer-term civil unrest in the country. And the son of the former Shah has been speaking to the media and speaking with people about how he's been contacted from within inside by different elements of the army and the diplomatic corps about their desire to see a regime change. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't think this is the goal of the U.S. and of Israel based on statements, but it may be inevitable depending on how the regime handles this.
All right. Mr. Kalyan, thank you so much for joining us on WION World is One with your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.